Good morning, everyone. Well, I'm Jun from Incheon Airport, and I'll be briefly explaining about how slot coordination is done in Korea in Incheon Airport, and also regarding our plans for the winter season. Before we get started, please let us invite our Deputy Director of International Air Transport Division at our government, Jiun Park, to the podium.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Ji-yoon Park, Deputy Director of Ministry of Land Infrastructure and Transport of Republic of Korea. It is really great to see you in person and very glad to have a chance to introduce and share the recent changes regarding border quarantine issues. And I would like to take this opportunity to deliver special thanks to all of the airlines and coordinators for their dedicated cooperation during COVID-19 situation. From the June 8th, Korea lifted up the most of the quarantine-related restrictions and started to recover the international air transport network. Comparing to pre-COVID-19, approximately 40% of the network will be recovered until July. However, since Korea CDC is still requiring pre-departure tests to all of the passengers and check health documents one by one at the airport for a while, a long waiting line and large congestion at the airport is expecting, which are huge potential challenges for us to remain the border being opened. In order to dealing with potential risk, we would like to request airlines entering into Korea to check pre-departure tests thoroughly and make sure the passenger complete the Q code, which can reduce queuing line at the airport dramatically. Please refer to following presentation, which will contain must-be known details for the ones who are planning to start operation from to Incheon at next season. I hope you to get useful information from today's sessions, and thank you very much for your valuable time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jiun Park. And also, I would like to introduce head coordinators from Korea, Kyo Kim. She's from Incheon Airport. Please give her a round of applause. And Junho Lee from Korea Airport Corporations. Okay, thank you again for coming this early in the morning. So today's presentation is going to be about mainly four things. The recent travel policy changes in Korea for this summer season, and our plan for the winter season. And some of you may have recognized that we have been divided into two groups in Korea. The SOC coordinators group has been divided into two. So I'd like to explain the situations behind those changes. And also, last but not least, I will tell you briefly about our slot capacity and about the constraints at the Incheon Airport. So let me begin. Well, Jiun Park has just explained most of the changes we had in Korea. So actually, for the last 3 years, we had a lot of restrictions regarding the air travel, international flight. So there has been a slot quota, originally it was 10 movements, 10 arrivals per hour for almost 2 years. And from May this year, it has been increased to 20 movements, arrivals per hour. And there was also a curfew between 2005 to 0455 for only the arrival passenger flights. And also the flight permissions were heavily restricted. So the frequencies and the destinations have been controlled by the government. But from the June 8th, all these restrictions were lifted. So there are no quota for the arrival flights. So the maximum 40 movements per hour are now in place, which was the pre-COVID level. And the curfew, it is gone, so we can have the flights 24 hours a day. And also the flight permission, there is no restrictions on getting a permission unless there is an issues with the traffic rights and the other stuff that were also in before the COVID. So airlines may operate those flights if they wish to. So our government is trying to have a rapid air travel recovery starting from June, and we are having quite a rapid recovery back from the COVID starting from July. And for that, he just mentioned that we need a Q code because although there are the restrictions regarding the air travel have been lifted, but there are still the quarantine processes the passengers have to go through. So it takes a long time to get through the immigration processes for both the Korean nationals and foreigners. So we are asking for the cooperation in making passengers to use this system, which they can input their required data before boarding and get a Q code, a QR code, which will be used for scanning all those documents. And it reduces the process into almost half minutes. It takes only 30 seconds to go through all these processes. So it will eventually increase our terminal capacity. So it will help to expedite the process of recovery. And so to the next season plans, we are trying to have more recovery from winter 22. So before that, for the last 2 or 3 years, we were actually having monthly flight permission, which means that the regular flights were approved month by month. So airlines had to go through all the processes each month. But from winter, we will have a full seasonal permission from the government, MONLID. So it will be granted on October. So please be minded of the deadlines. And also, yes, the restrictions, they have been lifted from June. So it will be continued till there is no other situations regarding COVID or other diseases happening. And also, the government is trying to have a recovery, and they are targeting to have 50% of pre-COVID level volume in winter. But well, if things get optimistic, we'll have about 70% of pre-COVID level volume, passenger volume in winter by the end of the winter, if things get better. And also regarding the cargo flight, full seasonal permission has been granted for the last 2 to 3 years, and it will be continued to have a full seasonal permission. But the slots, the availability of those slots depends on how the passenger flights recover back from the COVID. So we will still have those slots returned to our airport due to the COVID-19 for the winter. So there will be some slots available for the ad hoc operations, but it won't be as many as we used to have before the winter season. So there might be some slight changes to your requested timing. And the tech stops, we will still support tech stops to those destinations where still border closed. So please make sure that you request those tech stops in service code X. And I saw some airlines sending confusing those service codes. So please make sure to send tech stops service codes to us. And regarding the slot elevation measure for the winter, before the winter season, we used to have a very generous elevation measures. We actually waived every historic slots, regardless of the situations in that specific market. So, but starting from winter, we will have certain requirements for the airlines to follow up. So, since we have lifted all the restrictions regarding air travel, we are in between reopen market and partially restrict market according to the definitions by WASB. So we will have, nothing has been determined for sure, but we will have a full series return up to 20 to 30% for this winter season. And of course, it will be returned between HBD and HBD plus 7. And also we will have between 60 to 70 utilization ratio. It's not, well, it won't be 80% because we're not fully recovered from the COVID. So it will be between 60 to 70, the use it rule. And but we will also grant JNUs for those cases where there are still the COVID-related reasons, like travel, flight, passenger restrictions. And also we have the general JNUs available, like those things were unforeseeable. And also the political situations will also be considered as JNUs. And to get granted a slot JNUS, you need to return your slot 6 weeks before the operation date. And it is a slight difference between the previous seasons because we used to have those slots returned like 6 months before the first date of that month. But we are now changing it to the deadline to the 6 weeks before the operation date, actual operation date of that flight. But nothing has been decided yet. It's a brief, rough outline of our plan for the winter season, and things will be announced, notified to the airlines on is by August before the HBD, and we will make sure that we give enough time for you to plan your season. And next is how things are done in Korea. Well, there has been a revision of Aviation Business Act in Korea. So the duty of slot coordination has been entrusted to each airport operator. So I'm from the Incheon Airport, and the Korea Airport Corporations are coordinating the other airports in Korea. So the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, the MOLIT, is in control of our slot policies, and also they give the schedule permit. And before the revision of this Business Act, the slot coordination was also controlled by the government. So it was under the supervision of the Seoul Regional Office of Aviation, and that office was called KASO. Probably many of you are familiar with the name KASO, Korea Airport Schedule Office. So it coordinated 3 airports in Korea, Incheon, Gimpo, and Jeju. But now actually we're now divided into 2 groups. So actually the formal name of our group is not KASO anymore, but we prefer to use that name still because many of you are familiar with that name. So I'm from Incheon International Airport Corporation, IIAC, and we are coordinating Incheon Airport. And Korea Airports Corporation, which is Juno Lee and Sui Lee is from, the KAC coordinates 5 airports in Korea. They previously coordinated Gimpo and Jeju Airport, and there were 3 additions to the list of coordinated airports: Busan, Daegu, and Cheongju. And these 3 are the military base for also for the public use. So they're not actually listed on the level 3 airports in the IATA website, but they're still coordinated. So you have to make sure that you send the SCR to the right place. Well, I know it is confusing to discern which emails you have to use to send your SCR, but well, we are now divided into 2 groups, so you have to make sure to send it to the right address. And also, each organization has 2 different email addresses for SCRs and general inquiries. So please send it to the right address. Will help us a lot. Okay, you may take a picture of this. Or if you go to the IATA website, we have this IC and SCR, our SCR addresses on the Excel file. So please send it to them. And for the general inquiries, you may ask questions on those SCR email addresses too, but we cannot actually see the attachments or in full screen because we are using a coordination system. It does not allow us to have a clear view of the other contents other than the SIM format messages. So please make sure you send the inquiries to the general inquiry mail. And so finally, we are here for the capacities and constraints. So in Korea, well, most of the airports, level of the airports have a lot of parameters to stick to, but we also have a lot of constraints in our coordination. So we have mainly 3 time-based constraints: 5-minute, 50-minute, and 60-minute constraints. I'll go one by one. So for the 5 minutes constraint, we are only allowed to have 8 movements per 5 minutes, including both arrival and departure. And we also have this destination duplication not allowed, which means that there has to be only 1 flight per destination during this 5 minutes. No 2 airlines operating the same destination during 5 minutes. And also for the 50-minute constraints, it's based on the departing route, which the flight uses. So we have mainly 4 different departing routes in Korea in Incheon Airport. In the western part of our airport, which includes the cities surrounding Beijing in China, and Europe and Middle East, we have 6 movements allowed during 50 minutes. And it also has a 60-minute constraint, which is 20 movement per hour. And for the south and western part of our airport, which includes Chinese cities surrounding Shanghai, and Southeast Asia and India destinations, it only allows 7 movements per hour and 7 movements per 50 minutes and 25 movements per hour. And for the eastern part, it includes the North and South America and Japan. The 8 movements are allowed for 15 minutes and 30 movements per hour. And southeastern part of our airport, which includes Southwest Pacific destinations, the same goes for the east. The 8 movement per 50 minutes and 30 movements per hour. And last but not least, we have 16 minutes constraint, and it is an actual capacity we have. We are only allowed to have a maximum of 70 movements per hour, but within these 70 movements, only the 65 passenger flights are allowed, and 40 arrivals and 41 departures. So it does not mean that we have set this 65 number for the flight passenger flights and 5 for the cargo flights. It only means that the maximum number of the passenger flights that can be during 60 minutes is 65 movement. And also we have this night reduction. This number is reduced to 52 movements during nighttime. And we also have to check this double 60-minute zone to ensure the balance within that 60 minute, which means that there has to be 70 movements from 01 to 00 and also from 31 to 30 to ensure the flights are not congested into certain period of time within that 60 minutes. And also we have those passenger number constraints due to the CIQ capacity. So for the arrivals, we have about 7.2, 7.7 thousand passengers available per hour, and also for the departure, 9.6 thousand passengers available. So we consider all these constraints, but thankfully we have this coordination system actually considering all these constraints for us and give us a warning if there is an exceeding request. So we do the coordination here in Korea following those constraints. So for the winter season, well, the yellow numbers are the historic slots that have been granted and waived for 3 years due to COVID. So it's almost close to our maximum capacity, 70. But that does not mean that we have, for example, we have 65 historic slots for the 6-hour morning and 6. But that does not mean that we have 5 other slots available for your flight, because there are constraints for arrivals, departures, and departing route. So it depends on which destination you are flying and which type of flight it is. So it is really difficult to give you extra slots even during those times. And the blue ones are the initial submissions by the airlines. So it well exceeds our capacity. And yes, there are not many slots we can spare for the new entrants, but we are trying to help those airlines by expanding our capacity. So actually our runway capacity is 90 movement per hour. The facilities are much in better position. But the air traffic control and the CIK due to those problems, the minimum threshold of our capacity is 75 movement. So our official airport capacity is 75 movements per hour, but the slot capacity is determined within the airport capacity, because even though we plan to have 70 flights per hour, for the actual operations, it well exceeds that number. We have seen 77 movements per hour, even more than that. So we try to set this slot capacity within the actual airport capacity to ensure the safety of all those flights. And before the COVID, we actually had a plan to expand our slot capacity and airport capacity by 2024, which was the plan was to have 85 airport capacity and have 83 slot capacity by then. But we all had a COVID situation and the plans got canceled because we had actually very low demand, so we have no logics and reasons to request to expand the capacities. But after we have a full recovery from the COVID, we will definitely try to expand it. So since we have a lot those runway facility capacities enough for our slot expansion, so we will try to continue our projects to increase the capacities and also to accommodate those initial submissions submitted by the airlines. So in Incheon Airport, we are still building those infrastructures. So in last year, the 4th runway of Incheon Airport has been completed, but the other 3 runways are now in resurfacing project. So we will be having 4 of these runways full by 2025, and also the other half of Terminal 2 will be completed in 2024. So by then, we will have those runway capacities increased to 107. So we have plenty of room for the expansion. So we will make sure that we're not sure of the timetable, but someday we will have more than 70 movements per hour, and hopefully sometimes more than 100. So yes, you may take a picture of it. And that's the end of the presentation. Thank you. And I would like to have any questions if you have. We had a lot of questions and answers yesterday, meeting the airlines one by one. We will also have meeting for today, but if you still have questions, please feel free to ask. The microphones will go around. No? Thank you. Thank you for coming.